Okay, I have the appointment set for Friday. Even though I didn't pick a time, gonna have to do that soon. But first, the middle child of the Loud family mauled himself as he pedaled down the street. I need to have Lola agree to come. Lincoln's fingers tapped on the handlebar as he briefly went over the traits specific to his spoiled sister. She'll probably want something in return for bringing her, like she usually does, but then again, so does Lynn. Usually make me play some sport with her. And he didn't think to ask for anything the last time I asked her for an advice. Lincoln momentarily glanced up at the clouds. Although Lola seems to be a bit more closer to Lori in attitude than Lynn, at least outside of competition. The Loud realized that he was riding past his house just as he passed a tree in the front lawn, making a abrupt U-turn before going to the garage. Vanzilla was still absent, but after seeing a few of his sisters get on the bus as he left for school, he deduced that his parents were using the age automobile. And even now, Venzo, none of my sisters seem to be the same as they used to be. Lenny's still nice and friendly, but I had a worried feeling she was smarter than she let on. It just didn't make sense on how she tries to free cooked chickens and lobsters, but now knows how to pick a key lock or build a whole new bed from scratch. Actually, she could make a fashionable clothes out of anything she wanted to. Lincoln then stopped at the front of the garage, hopping off his bike before wheeling inside. He frowned as he, a little remembering the fashionista, explained to him, "Well, I thought it would be better if she was playing dumb instead of needing medicine." Lincoln unstrapped his helmet before setting it on the handlebars. And it makes me wonder, how did Lola ended up being so mean, like she always like this? At least I don't think she was. As the Loud made his way to the house, he dug further into his memories, pushing past the memories where Lola used intimidation or blackmail to get what she wanted. When the twins were born, Lincoln could recall himself trending to them in the same fashion he does with Lily. Surprisingly, he did remember at least one moment where Lucy was actually playing with the younger babies, much different from her current standoffish demeanor when they were just infants. The twins did have a vastly different personalities like they do today. While Lana usually made a bigger mess than Lola whenever she was being fed, which Lincoln might say she was a habit of keep since then. But the two girls were very young and could barely talk outside of a few words, and when it came to crying, oh, so many nights were lost. At one point, Lincoln believed the two might have doing it on purpose, and it wasn't a competition between them. It's funny how someone can change them in just a few years. As babies, Lola and Lana got along pretty well, probably because they literally spent all day with each other and would get fussy when separated. Lincoln frowned slightly, and then they were hit with their terrible twos, and it's like they didn't want anything to do with each other. They started fighting a lot, which didn't change even today, and the loud boy scratched his head. Was that the time they started to literally stand out from each other? Lana, for the same reason, started trying to eat bugs when we were playing around, and I had to get her to stop more than once. He hummed to himself as he entered the house. But I don't think Lola started doing pageants at that age. Lincoln paused his thoughts as he heard a small dog barking in the living room. The sound of paws rapidly hit the floor, made its way to him. As Charles came to the kitchen, "Hey, boy!" Lincoln greeted the small pup as he climbed on his pants leg. The Loud bent down and stroked the mutt in the head a few times before standing up and opening the fridge. Charles went over to get his doggy bowl and began drinking whatever water remained. Lincoln pulled out a can of soda, quickly cracking it open and taking a sip. As he did so, his chest began to fill with nervousness. He had so many questions about the young girl that he wanted answered, but it seemed like the only way to get them to ask was from the source directly. The Loud bit his cheek. What was the whole point of trying to get an appointment? He told himself. One may think Lincoln having much less masculinity of being afraid of a girl 5 years his junior year. He would be fools for underestimating the power of Lola Loud. Her temper was one of the not to forget when first experienced, and if you were ever intimidated by her fierce demeanor, she always had figuring out your deepest secrets. That was the scariest part about her. and she knew how to get inside your head. And it was quite the transformation over the years. How did a girl go from being sweet and caring to being what Lincoln might describe as something similar to one of those classic Disney villains? I know it has something to do with the pageants Lola does, which is weird because they seem pretty harmless. Lincoln frowned in disgust. I still wish I didn't take part in one. I guess winning all the time went to her head like it does with Lynn. I mean, go-kart, money prizes, and a trophy? I am almost surprised as my other sisters wouldn't jump at the chance to win something like that. He recalled the time Lana took Lola's place so they could win the Dairyland tickets. Or maybe not. He began heading towards his room. It was only one-time thing with Lana, and Lynn would be too grossed out doing it. Lincoln then shuddered a little. And I can't even imagine Lucy being a part of that. He hummed to himself as he reached the top of the step. Maybe Lenny or Lori did something like that when they were actually little. Lola sort of kind of reminds me of how Lori usually acts. As he entertained his new theory, Lincoln took a chance to peek outside the twins' room. There was a little change when he first looked in there the first day he came back home, but was still a surprise to him of how much more the room felt open without how the stuffed animals and living animals taking up the space. Lola kept her princess a squeak bed. If only Lincoln assumed that would be much more difficult to replace than regular gowns. In fact, he hadn't seen her Jeep go-kart anywhere either. Guess Mom and Dad got rid of that too, Lincoln muttered before heading back of the room. As he entered his own room, the first thing he noticed was papers lying on his desk, neatly stacked to look presentable. Lincoln raised a brow, unsure of the state where they have left him in his morning before picking one up. All right. His memory fulfilled as he studied the pictures. A part of him felt whenever or not he should continue with this mini-comic, it was all just based on the crime-fighting dreams he had. And if by crime you mean a bigger scope of dealing with his family drama, although my head does feel a little clearer whenever I get one of these scenes out, the middle child said to himself. He sat on the chair as he studied the drawings, trying to remember where he left off. His creative side began to take over. Lincoln sat his bag down and gently pushed his door closed, not wanting to be disturbed while he worked. He had to remember of an idea of what to do regarding his sisters in his fictional world. Not anything harmful that, like they say, him taking revenge against them for their actions. He had grown tired of fighting, and it wouldn't make any sense now if there was some outside force influencing things he already established. But hopefully he could employ something that involved more teamwork. Or something that would match the level of relief and calm when he ironed things down with Lynn. Well, sort of. He didn't completely trust her. As Lincoln opened his backpack, he started searching for his pencil when he heard the front door opening downstairs. Man, I hate math, came the voice of a certain loving child. It's not that hard. 1 + 1 is 2, 2 + 2 is 4, and so on, the more feminine voice added. Not that. I can ace that stuff all day. It's the stupid multiplying. It's sort of the same thing as adding. Dividing is a little harder, an older, more monotonous voice said. Lincoln could hear the voices growing louder as the footsteps pounded on the stairs. Well, I'm starting to hate it if you like English. To be fair, English is one of the most difficult languages in the world. Different variations of the world have different meanings, and you can have to learn what they meant for, Lucy stated. I still have issues when it comes to poems for that reason. Lola could be heard muttering something, but there was two that caught Lincoln's interest. I hate reading. This made the middle child raise a brow. For a moment he thought Lola could actually read well enough. Just ask how many times he dove her siblings into personal diaries, journals, for aforementioned blackmail he was debating about earlier. Whenever she's complaining about her assignment, and she does like to read. Or maybe it depends what she's reading. The loud mulled to himself. It would be hard to read something you don't like. Heck, there's a certain comic series I wouldn't even think of touching. Lincoln stared at the door. All of this is my sisters took the bus today. When Luann and the younger ones except for Lisa and Lily should be home. However, he only heard three of his younger siblings. They are probably just busy with something today. He glanced at his drawing for a second before looking at the door again. Signed to himself, "Guess now's a better time now than ever." Pushing his chair back, Lincoln stood up quietly and opened his door. The hallway was empty, with the door to the twins' room slightly ajar. It was pulled open seconds later as Lana came out, scratching the back seat of her overalls as she went to the bathroom. If she bothered to look to her left when she exited, she would have been startled to see her brother standing there. Not only that, Lincoln wasn't intimidated by Lana. He believed that he might be the second best sister to connect with after Lenny, but like Luna, she could still be fierce on her own fight. "Did you know that she took part in gator wrestling competition once?" Pushing that thought aside, Lincoln peeked into the twins' room. Wait, is that Lola? The boy did make a double take as he studied his sisters. The young girl sat on the small table in the middle of the room. Her back was turned to him, and with the head popped up by a hand, what caught Lincoln's attention was the fact that she was wearing a set of overalls, much like Lana's, and her normally long flowing pink hair looked considerably shorter, just about reaching to her upper back, if to be precise. To get further confirmation on which twin she was dealing with, he spotted a tuft of hair that was angled to her left, sticking out on her head. The former pageant winner must have had some sort of sixth sense kicked in, and she glanced over her shoulder, visibly flinch upon seeing her brother. Knowing he was caught in the act, Lincoln came out of his hiding spot. "Hey!" The awkwardness in his voice was just already convoyed with his posture. "Hi, Lincoln," Lola greeted in a similar manner, but it was more due to confusion. "Do you, need anything?" she asked, while turning her chair around, seeing the hesitant look in his eyes. "Yeah," Lincoln nodded his head, but he folded his arms behind his back. "How have you been doing?" Lola lightly grazed her lower lip with her teeth as she actually felt a little exasperated at her brother's reluctance. "This is no picnic for me either, Lincoln. We haven't talked to each other in months." She brought up a hand to her cheek. "Actually, I forgot to be the last girl he ever thinks about, or our bond, if I could call it that." The blonde began to see the anxiousness growing in her brother's demeanor, not wanting to let the moment slip. "I've been okay-ish." She glanced at the book behind her. "I have to read this dumb story, though." "Oh," Lincoln tilted his head to look past his sister's frame. "Is it bad?" "Well, not actually. I mean, it's something related to the three little pigs." Lola patted her fingers together. Lincoln squinted an eye. His curiosity began to outweigh the nervousness as he stepped further into the room. "Sounds pretty easy. I mean, you've read this stuff more complex than that." "Yeah, but, Lola stuttered slightly. "How do I say this?" She glanced back at Lincoln. Can you shut the door for a sec?" That was a tall order, but knowing her brother might respond, she didn't want what she was about to say spread around the house. Likewise, Lincoln felt his anxiety begin to resurface, but the sad, embarrassed look on his sister's face had tugged at the 8-year-old elder brother's instinct. It might be a facade to hide her true intentions, but so far Lincoln couldn't see any hints intended to malice. Keeping his interactions with Lynn in mind, he gently pushed the door back with his foot until it closed, but not completely, as he left it open just a crack out of caution. Lola appeared satisfied before she reluctantly said, "I don't actually know how to read." Lincoln bit his cheek as unimpressed gaze stared at the 6-year-old. I find that hard to believe since—" "Sorry," Lola interrupted, knowing the statement was lacked any weight of the surface. "I mean, I can read, but it's only stuff that I'm familiar with." She rubbed her arm. "I know I read you guys' diaries and stuff secrets before, but I got so used to your handwriting and it was easier for me." The younger of the twins glanced at the printed text. "But when it comes to other books, I just get lost in words and lose track on where I started." Lincoln then made a quizzical look, unsure whether or not he should trust that information or assume she was lying. A small bead of sweat began to form on the side of the girl's head. "Okay, I get a lot," Lola admitted, pulling their cheek back in frustration. "My grade is at C right now, since I just copy off Lana, which isn't the best idea knowing her, she muttered before resting her head in her hands. But if it gets any lower, Mom and Dad are going to ground me again. Lincoln made a curt nod. Did you ask any of our sisters to help you? Lucy or Lisa could have definitely been your best because poetry is everything to Lucy, and Lisa as well. Lisa. Lola shook her head. I don't want anyone else finding out, she glowered a little. Certain reasons. Lincoln frowned as he had a hunch about her reason. He didn't want to use that as a blackmail against you. The poor former pageant winner winced as the word stung, and it didn't respond for a moment. I walked right into that one. Lincoln then blinked in surprise upon realizing what he said. So sorry, I didn't mean... Lincoln, you don't have to be sorry about it. Lola turned to him. It's no secret. I've used that card so many times to make you guys do what I wanted. The guilt-written face adorned her face, and half of the time it was just against you. So if anything, I'm the one who should be saying sorry. She sulked in her chair, although I doubt it will change anything. Lincoln then shifted slightly on his feet. Well, that's why I wanted to ask. Lola looked up at him as she seemed pretty hesitant on something. Are you doing anything on Friday? No, Lola raised a brow. I know school's closed for us, but I don't have an extracurricular activities and stuff or whatever. So, Lincoln began swaying the balls of his feet. I want to schedule an appointment for us to see Dr. Lopez. Thought it would help. He shrugged. Clear the air, I guess. Lola raised a brow at the mention of their therapist. Why would he want to do that? I mean, I could just tell him why She bit her tongue as she soon realized to the point of meeting. He wants to know why I scare him so much, and he won't ask me now, 'cause... Lola wiped her face, making it look like she was getting rid of an itch, but her eyes felt wet. He doesn't trust me. I mean, I guess I wouldn't hurt him. Pretty much either, knowing my attitude. The blonde gave a small nod. Okay, did you pick a time yet? Her voice was just above whisper. Whether Lincoln noticed it or not, he didn't show. Not yet, but I will call later. He started to notice Lola's face began to contort into a small glare as she stared at the floor. The boy was instinctively started to back away, but he stopped when he heard a small sniffle. It's not fair! Why do I need to see a therapist with him when Lynn of all people got easy pass? He called out more for a session a lot more than one time, but she had broken his arms, all the things, and the one session was just so to understand that damn protocol. But then Lincoln talked to her a lot more after that, and even Lenny got easy. The 6-year-old thought bitterly as she glanced at her fingers, more especially the faintly visible scratch marks that had long since healed. Lola pursed her lips as her hands clumped together. But hey, they didn't run Linky's perfect smile. Her mind briefly flashed the day Lincoln had been taken to the hospital, especially at the hour at the fact. As Lola began to realize the weight of what occurred, she then felt a stinging sensation on her fingers. Checking her hands, the 6-year-old discovered that she had fingered parts of her pink glove had torn apart at a few spots. Each of her fingers, aside from the thumbs, have aspirations of the skin and above the formal proximal of the middle phalanx, the base and middle parts of the finger, and the cuts were deep enough to draw blood. At first, Lola wasn't even certain that they were where the scratches came from, but as she made through the thorough inspection of her wounds, they found that she looked had been teeth marks, based on the sides and grooves of the blood-filled lines. It was then Lola finally realized that during the brawl, when she had struck Lincoln's face, she must have rammed her fists into his mouth more than once. She wasn't really aiming for the specific spot during that frenzy, so it could have been viewed as accidental. Still, it did have the little ease on her guilt upon her assumptions being proven once Lincoln's injuries were fully diagnosed. She even holed herself up into the room, much for the day hearing Rita mention that she had a few of Lincoln's teeth pulled from a long-awaited dental checkup. Lola, Lincoln called out gently, breaking the girl's thoughts. She turned to her side, being a little shocked as the 11-year-old was standing next to her. Would it be okay if I help you read? He asked with a gentle, if somewhat a funny smile. Lola blinked away, a stray tear lowering before her head. Yes, she replied. The young girl couldn't tell whether Lincoln was doing it because he wanted to, or was out of fear that she might do something from her frustration. Either way, she felt a little warmer inside just being within her brother's presence, without the tension of ruining things. Walking towards him, seeing him within arm's distance, she was tempted to hug him. Her arm moved a little sideways towards him, as if responding to her instincts. Sadly, she pulled back, being hesitant now that he might react. So, Lincoln directed his attention towards his open book. Where should we start? Lola had her hand in the air for a moment as she scanned the text, trying to figure out where she left it off. To Lincoln, the story just looked like several neatly etched paragraphs with pictures that looked to accompany certain scenes. But to Lola, it was confusing to say the least. Aside from the pictures standing out, the words seemingly to get all bunched together in her eyes, making for an unintelligible mess. As she breathed before exhaling through her nose, "Let's take it from the top," Lola replied, while turning the page back to the beginning. "So, kids, how was everyone's day?" Rita asked, hoping that to spur some small talk amongst the table. Dinner had been pretty uneventful for the last couple days, without making a scene. About some of the notable changes, Lincoln sat and took his usual spot between Lily and Lynn, which hardly went unnoticed by the parents. They hadn't exactly deduced their reasoning, other than it was likely due to Lincoln wanting to be near people he trusted. Unlike yesterday, he seemed to be more relaxed as their son gazed at the tents and ate his food at a smooth pace. Previously, the boy could have eaten quick in his pace, and his body looking rigid, as if he were to come prepared to leave the sign of danger at the table. The parents still hadn't known the reason why their son appeared angry yesterday, but they had traced his gaze towards Lori more than once. It was definitely one of them they would have to ask her about later. In the meantime, it seemed some of the kids were doing better than they had been in weeks. Murmurs began spreading around the table as the kids answered their parents' question. "Fine. Okay, I guess. Boring. Same as always. It was samey, but I hung out with a friend afterwards." That statement had the last statement of the siblings glance at Lenny out of curiosity. "With who?" came Lori's question. "This guy named Chaz," Lenny giggled. "We were at the mall for a while. We were at his job because he works at Forever 21. It was so nice to hang out while I was looking for some clothes." Luna squinted her eye in confusion as she didn't know who Chaz was amongst her sister's social groups. Lori tapped her chin. "Isn't Chaz some sort of the fat and chubby guy with the orange curly hair?" Lenny nodded, stabbing her food with the moment of the fork to snag a piece of meat. "I think he's kinda cute." Lola stuck her tongue out in disgust. "Ugh, not my cup of tea." The fashionist rolled her eyes, not bothering to say anything, as she knew it wouldn't be nice. "Well, I think he sounds like an upright cap. Do you say?" Lynn Sr. offered, speaking at the Fox British accent. "Well, he does, sound nice," Rita agreed, "although we've never met him in person." He's an alright guy, I guess. He usually keeps quiet and keeps to himself," Lori replied, picking off what remained of her vegetables, although some people made jokes about his weight. Lenny's smile turned into a distraught frown. "That's just mean. Lots of people are like that, sis," Luna starting to chew. "Speaking of, you kinda got in late." Lenny raised an eyebrow. "Huh? I just said why." "Sorry, love. Was talking to Lori," Luna clarified, when she was putting her fork down at her eldest sibling. Seeing the look in the musician's eyes, Lori knew exactly what she was getting on about. However, unlike before when she could gloat about their relationship, the stuff between her and Bobby wasn't something she wished to elaborate on. Had to deal with the group project for history. It's going to be like that for most of the month. Lena bit her cheek. She looked as if she wanted to press her more for information, but ultimately against it. The sounds of utensils scraping the plates filled the void for a brief moment. During that time, Lana stole a glance at her twin, and then to Lincoln. A small dog-like whine quietly passed her their throat as she sulked in her seat, her eyebrows slanting down slightly, coming from the bathroom. When she saw Lincoln was helping Lola learn to read from the doorway, As touching as that was, especially since yesterday her sisters really needed to the help of the aspiring mechanic, couldn't help but feeling the burning sensation in her chest. Now, I know Link was trying to help her, but how did he get so chill around her that quick? It's not like I made him dressed up as a stupid butler for some dumb tea party every week, or threatened to use his secrets against him. Lana pierced her lips, or tattle on him for everything, even when it wasn't his fault. Lana didn't want to feel envious of her sister. They both used a lot lost from their mistakes. She had little to no pets aside from her two closest companions, while Lola had to give up all of her dresses, trophies, and most of her stuffed animals. Actually, she could have gotten those back when they went to the storage place. I'm surprised she even decided to have Dad drop that stuff off of the donation box, since she still sleeps with those things, and her dresses were given to the pageant whoever. The oldest of the twins subconsciously picked at her nose, and the go-kart is still back in storage. Her eyes watered a bit as the memory decreased the snake came to mind, but she got lucky. Lola could have gotten her stuff back, while most of my friends are gone. Lana rubbed her nose before breathing in slightly, making sure not to make a sniffle. She didn't want to have any curious eyes drawn towards her. Once dinner was finished, the parents decided to let the kids up early for bed so they can handle the dishes. Well, that went smoother than expected, Lynn stated, with very little optimism reflecting from his voice. He scrubbed the bottom of the pan with some vinegar in his order, just to get it to dry up the food stains from the surface. The kids are probably still adjusting to Lincoln being around here more often, Rita replied, wiping down a plate before setting the dish on the rack. He's only been back here for less than a week. After all, but he's been pretty brave. She then glanced at her husband. Intentionally, I thought we would have to bring meals up to him. Yeah, the parrot chuckled nervously. Glad we dodged that bullet. The depressant frown, however, as the father of 11, considerable state of his children. But he's still uneasy around the girls. Glancing at his wife, did you notice the way he was looking at Lori yesterday? Lori nodded. If I had to guess, he figured why Lenny and she ended up fighting. She still wasn't happy about her daughters going overboard with such a petty argument. But what's done is done, and what's much is as they still wish they intervened back then. There wasn't anything that could change it. It looks like they calmed down at least. Do you think it's a little odd since she's been sitting next to Junior for the past few days? Every dental assistant paused as she contemplated everything, from her son's nightmares to general avoidance of his siblings, especially when it came to rides at school. There were certainly small victories here and there, and even the tension still remained thick, made it as if no progress had been made at all. All things considered, it's very lucky that he's willing to sit around with his siblings at all. Sure, Lynn stuck his tongue out as he scrubbed a little harder. Come on, you darn grease! Ah, there we go. He sighed in relief, before running some hot water into the pan. But given how he doesn't seem to be mind being around Junior he could be making a comeback. Rita then gave a hum and thought. Well, he certainly hasn't had any nightmares lately. Another frown how informed as she dried her hands. But the real change is seeing whether or not he can manage to be in the car with all of us. He could always just sit up front, Lynn offered, as he handed the pot to her. Rita made a light huff at the idea. After the time the van had been demolished, I don't think you would prefer to sit there. He then stuffed the pan in the dishwasher, although we did fix up a lot of seats when it was rebuilt. By fixed, you mean the newer ones? The monarch nodded. And speaking of which, don't you think it's time about getting a new van? She shut the washer. Even when Vanzilla was rebuilt, the engine wasn't replaced. I know, Lynn replied with a sad tone, but I've had that van since my dad gave it to me. He eyed the old clunker from outside the window, and it was my grandfather's van. He stared at the sink. They're both long gone now, but Vanzilla always reminds me of them. Rita then looked at her hubby with a statement of understanding. Lynn's father had just passed months before Lori was born, now only having one grandparent from the form of their father. Her mother passed away some time before she met Lynn, but she could understand why she cherished the memories, especially typically small objects that would be much easier to maintain. That didn't excuse the idea of keeping a 40-year-old van. Sure, it would have been good for financial option since their car note was paid off years ago, but at the same time, it required as much maintenance as the old BMW. And yes, Lana helped keep repairs in order, even going as far as to break the parts so she can learn to fix them. But getting said parts steadily costs more than money, and it would have been much easier just to get a car made them within the last decade to pay the monthly bill in addition to regular maintenance. Then they would have had to worry about additional maintenance when a problem arose. However, seeing her husband's distant look, Rita didn't feel up the courage to press further. They'll always be around, she smiled, putting a hand on his chest. In here. Lyndon smiled before placing a hand on his wife's hip. Upstairs, Lori was doing some late-night research on her project on her phone before turning in for the night. She was currently alone in her room as Lenny was taking a shower, and knowing her roommate, she could be in there for ages. The eldest sibling looked up from her phone when she heard a knock at the door, spotting Luna in the doorway. Hey, you got a sec? The eldest sibling made an annoying frown. If it's about this morning, I already told you everything. Not that, Luna answered, as she entered and closed the door slightly with her foot. About earlier with Bobby. How did it go? Lori raised a brow, not having fully expected that kind of question. Reflectively, she was about to tell Luna that it wasn't any of her business. Her own standing with her former boyfriend was still something that she didn't fully access yet. However, aside from her mind, she couldn't help but the curiosity within her sister's question. Heck, Luna had already paid attention to her before when Lori used to boast about whenever she and Bobby dated or got any gift kind-hearted that she had gotten so far. All of us had literally lost our social lives months ago. Did Luna like anyone back then? She never mentioned having a boyfriend. Lori mulled to herself before replying, It didn't go the way I thought it would, namely him yelling at me for being a horrible sister or bad person in general. I told him everything what happened, and while he was upset about it, he understood my reasons. She put her phone down. It's left me wondering why I had broken up with him in the first place. Wasn't that because you dumped him he dumped you a few months ago? Luna pointed out. Yes, Lori said in the dejected and mindfully annoyed tone, but even Carol said I probably jumped the gun onto that, and she was partially right. She folded her legs as she sat up. I left Bobby, yes, not only because I thought we would be finished, but because I don't want to see myself being good enough for him. Like he's so sweet and generous and hard-working, Lori stated in a longing tone. Luna made a frown that made it look out of envy. Well, at least you have some roadies to talk to. Her gaze then fell on the floor as she scuffed a spot on the carpet with her foot. Why'd you ask? Just wanted to know how you did it, the musician answered. Lori pursed her lips. If we were going to be real here, I didn't do anything. In fact, I'd still be on my own if Carol hadn't decided to talk to me that day. Luna stared a little quizzically at her. Look, I think we both know how I was jealous of Carol, not just because she was way a better person, but it's hard not to be friends with someone like her. The blonde stared at Luna in the eyes. So what's the real person when you asked? Well, there was an old friend that caught your eye. Luna averted her gaze from Lori's. A slight glare was her face, and her sister's choice of words. The older sister watched as the young brunette rubbed her arm as her cheeks became a little warm. Lori then opened her eyes a little more as the coy smile formed on her lips. So you were just checking them out? Luna then gave a subtle nod with what Lori assumed to be a hum of agreement. Lori resisted the urge to squeal in delight, as the girls usually do when they find someone in their family has smitten. Lori patted the seat next to her, with Luna begrudgingly obligating. Lori resisted, but of course she let her sit. Maybe I should have kept my mouth shut, the brunette sighed in awkwardly. Upon sitting down, Luna was bombarded with questions. So who is it? Is it someone in your band? I mean, it's gotta be someone who's really seemed really close. Lori fired a quick session before pausing to think. Is it that tall, slim guy in your band? Luna's face seemed to get a little redder as she sat there with her hands on her lap. To Lori's surprise, the brunette had shook her head. Lori tapped her chin. Is it Chunk? She cringed a little disgust out of the thought. Isn't he a little old for you? Luna made a growl of frustration. He's not a guy, she yelled out, glaring at her sister. And Chunk is only 21. Lori raised a brow and her eyes opened up. Really? I thought he was like almost 30. She backtracked to Luna's statement. Wait, what do you mean it's not a guy? Luna felt her chest throb as she tucked her legs close to her torso. She kept this a little known fact to herself. Well, she couldn't remember, but she dreaded what the others might think, given all the stereotypes about not having certain feelings. Heck, Lori would even usually be the last person she'd tell this out of fear that she posted on social media. Lenny being second because keeping secrets is next to impossible with her forgetfulness. But at the same time, Lori was literally the only person in the house that made some progress in talking with some people, former love interest. Category that had been relatively smooth outcome. Drawing a breath, it's not a bloke, it's 'cause I'm not as straight and as narrow if you caught my drift. Lori blinked in praise and confused her. Not straight, as if it's not a guy? Her eyes then widened in surprise. You're a lesbian? Luna just gave a cold glare. No, she spoke curtly. I mean, I still like guys, but I'm just into girls too. She partially buried her head against her knees. Oh, so you're bi, Lori replied, entwining with her fingers. When did this happen? Can't exactly remember when. I think it was around freshman year of high school, or maybe it was last year in middle school. But either way, you know some of the things I noticed about guys? Well, I also started to notice some things about girls too, you know, Luna explained with some hesitation. I don't know why, but it just feels natural to me. Might be because I keep an open mind. You're always the chilled sister, ignoring the never having the mute button installed part, was Lori's reply as she smiled. But why does that mean your options are more diverse compared to others? She rested her chin on one hand as her other dropped to the lap. So who is this lucky girl? Luna squinted her eyes. So you aren't weirded about me looking at both ways? Lori raised a brow. No, I mean, should I? No, Luna said quickly. Well, it's just... The brunette tapped her fingers together. Some people really don't have good vibes about it. You're the first person I've ever told this to, but still. She shifted her position slightly. I don't know how you guys would think of it. Lori made a frown of disgust. She was all too familiar with the teasing, bewilting, and outright bullying people who opened up in public. Mind you, it was never seen at school, as they have a strict policy against that sort of thing. But that little did any disgusting post that she had seen online. She could only imagine it was kind of hell Luna would have gone for this if it was known immediately after losing her bandmates. I get everyone else is, but why us? Lori asked in a hurt tone. You know you could have told us anything. Luna sighed. I was afraid you guys might shun me or kick me out. I've seen stories about it happening to other kids. If you guys tease me about it, I wouldn't be too upset. A hardened gaze formed as she stared at the carpet. But I grow tired of Luann's gay jokes after one day. Lori nodded understanding. I get that, but let's be honest, Luna. This family isn't religious. I'm pretty sure Lisa is an atheist at that. And as for the second part, she folded her arms. I guess we accidentally made it a standard, but seeing we teased Lincoln about him liking Princess Pony for an entire week, and then even then, it still turned out we did it for no reason. Turning into Luna, but that does not mean we don't love you if you told us bi, gay, pan, I guess. It wouldn't matter to us, 'cause you're still our sister. She placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, to which Luna raised her hand and gently grabbed with a smile. And speaking of which, you never said who this girl was who you were aiming for. Luna let out a chuckle. Well, you have ever seen this blonde girl around my height in the band, with a teal streak in her hair?